Everybody has moments in their life when you feel as if you're standing on the edge. Maybe you're considering a kiss on the first date, or perhaps your finger is quivering above the send button for an email with your 2-week notice. You're scared, or uneasy, or maybe apprehensive. You're unsure of the outcome, but you know you have to act. Taking the plunge is courage. Moral courage incorporates the previous concept and hinges on the reasonings behind it. Normally, courage on its own is not mutually exclusive towards what is deemed morally acceptable. I believe that one can be acting out of selfishness or disgust, or some other apprehensive motivator, and still be courageous. It simply requires one to take initiative with full knowledge that they are the underdog, knowing full well that consequences can and will arise from their choices. Adding the aspect of morality means that the individual must be exercising courage because they believe it to be the right thing to do. However, the right thing to do is often entirely subjective and depends on the ideals and values that you hold true to determine what is and isn't an acceptable reason for acting. In my experience, moral courage means committing to a stance with full knowledge of any negative repercussions that may arise, and choosing to act in a manner that begets the greatest amount of good to all parties involved, despite what others may deem acceptable or favorable to you or others. That last statement was a bit of a mouthful, so let's break it down to fully understand my position. First and foremost is at least a little self-sacrifice. Right actions have a moral value only if they are done with a good will, that is, a will to do your duty for duty's sake. To act courageously is to be at odds with an opposing force that could harm or, at minimum, inconvenience you or your interest in some way or another. According to Nietzsche, the act of struggle leads to virtue. However, a line must be drawn between acting with self-interest and acting because of self-interest. As Richard Dawkins explains, the survival of the fittest really means the survival of genes, because it is only genes that really survive down through many generations. A gene that didn't look after its own interests would not survive. It is only natural to act with at least some consideration for oneself. After all, isn't the individual a person too? But if some individual acts to gain some benefit and not for one's duty, then they aren't acting with moral courage. The second aspect of my definition hinges on the criterion that the greatest good be achieved for the greatest number of people. The second aspect of my definition hinges on the criterion that the greatest good be achieved for the greatest number of people. This is very much derivative of the standard consequentialist outlook, while using utilitarianism as a sort of measuring stick to weigh the decision. I strongly believe in Kantian ethics and the concept of categorical imperative. Kant says that all our duties, all the moral imperatives, can be logically derived from a principle that he calls the categorical imperative. It tells us to act only on that maxim through which you can at the same time will that it should become a universal law. This removes much of the relativism behind ethical dilemmas and renders it down to an intuitive yes or no question that can be made quickly and precisely. This is important, as acting despite others' opinions and beliefs is the final contingency that my moral courage assessment is based. Socrates did not believe in the opinions of the majority. He reasoned that if one could decide for themselves the correct answer to a question, then 50 others disagreeing ought to have no influence. This is imperative to moral courage, as rocking the boat and going against the flow will create disturbances, as mentioned previously. If one is to be truly courageous in an ethical dilemma, he must disregard the concerns of all those around him in order to focus on what's morally correct, and not what others pressure him to do. Moral courage to me means acting despite fear or negative circumstances that would otherwise inhibit you from reaching your goals. It's easy to act when the cards favor your position. It's easy to act when you know you have something to gain. It's not easy to act when influences are pushing you in a direction that you know to be wrong. In instances like these, moral courage is the powerful force behind the decision that will help you sleep at night.